Cowboy questioned Apache at Riverbend, and her answer split the sky like thunder. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now back to our main characters. Jake Miller, a cowboy from the small town of Riverbend, stood by the riverbank, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, scanning the landscape, as he adjusted the brim of his hat. The sun was just beginning to dip below the edge of the mountains, casting a warm golden hue across the sky. The river in front of him flowed steadily, its current strong but not overwhelming, as if the land itself had been shaped by time and stories long forgotten. Jake had been riding for hours, searching for answers to questions that had been plaguing him for weeks. The disappearance of livestock, strange sightings of figures in the distance, and rumors that things in Riverbend were about to change. But none of these were as pressing as the mystery standing before him now. She was an Apache woman, a figure of quiet power and untold stories. He had seen her from a distance before, always watching, always waiting, but never speaking. Today, however, something was different. She was closer now, standing by the water's edge, her dark eyes meeting his. There was no hostility in her gaze, but there was something else, something that spoke of secrets held tightly, stories left untold. Jake approached her cautiously, his horse steady beneath him. "What brings you to the river tonight?" he asked, his voice low but clear. The Apache woman didn't answer right away. She merely stepped into the shallow waters, the sound of her feet stirring the surface of the river like a whisper in the wind. "I came for what was lost," she finally said, her voice soft but carrying a weight that settled in Jake's chest. Her words hung in the air between them, like a question without an answer, a riddle wrapped in the silence of the night. Jake took a step forward, but before he could speak again, she raised a hand, signaling him to stop. "The land remembers," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "And the river remembers, too." There was a pause, the tension in the air palpable. Jake's mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. What did she mean? The land remembers? The river remembers? He had no answer, and he was starting to feel like he was in over his head. "What is it that you seek?" Jake asked, his voice now a mix of curiosity and confusion. The Apache woman finally turned to face him fully. "What I seek," she said slowly, "is what you will never understand until the time comes." Her eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment, Jake felt a chill run through him. The sky above seemed to darken, the wind picking up, swirling around them both. And then, in a voice that seemed to echo through the very earth beneath their feet, she spoke again. "You have asked the wrong question, Cowboy." The words hit him like thunder, splitting the air around them, and for a fleeting second, the world seemed to pause. Jake's heart skipped a beat, and he found himself frozen in place. The answer she gave was not just a response, but a warning, a revelation that carried with it the weight of something far larger than either of them could comprehend. The tension in the air was thick now, the storm that had been building suddenly breaking. The silence that followed her words was deafening, leaving Jake with nothing but the sound of his own breathing and the rushing of the river nearby. He stared at her, trying to process what she had said, and what it meant for him, for Riverbend, and for everything he thought he knew about this land. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the tension almost suffocating. Jake stood there, his boots planted firmly in the dirt, watching Iana as she lowered her hand from the air, her eyes still locked on his. The river behind them continued to rush, oblivious to the weight of the moment unfolding. Jake wanted to speak, to ask more questions, but the silence stretched, pulling at him, forcing him to stand there, frozen. For the first time in his life, Jake felt like a stranger in his own land. He had spent years riding these trails, knowing the land like the back of his hand. But this was something else entirely. Iana's words, her presence, it was like stepping into a world he couldn't understand, A world where the rules didn't apply. His hand instinctively reached for his belt, but he stopped himself. There was no need for his gun here. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. I don't understand, Jake said finally, his voice rough from the silence. Ayana's lips barely moved as she responded, but her voice was clear, cutting through the air like a sharp breeze. No one does, Cowboy. Not yet. She turned her gaze to the river, and for a moment, Jake thought she might walk away. But then she spoke again, her words slow, deliberate. You've crossed paths with something older than your kind, something older than even the land you walk on. The time for questions is over. It's time for you to listen. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories, heard whispers from the old ones about the land's power, its mysteries. But he never believed them. To him, they were just tales to pass the time around the campfire. Now, standing here with Ayana, those stories didn't seem so far-fetched. She was right. He wasn't prepared for what was coming. What do you mean? Jake asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Ayana glanced at him, her expression unreadable. You've asked the wrong question, she said again, her eyes narrowing. The question isn't why. The question is what will you do now? Jake took a step closer, but she held up a hand to stop him. Don't come any closer, she said, her voice firm. You don't know what you're dealing with. The warning in her voice was clear, but Jake didn't back down. I need to know, he said, his voice thick with determination. What are you protecting? What's at stake? Ayana finally turned to face him fully, her expression softening, but her eyes still held that fire, an intensity that made Jake take another step back. I'm protecting more than just my people, she said quietly. I'm protecting the balance. The land can't be taken, not by anyone. Jake wasn't sure what she meant by balance, but something in her words resonated deep within him. He had always known there was something special about this land, something sacred. He just hadn't understood it until now. Then I'll help, Jake said, his voice steady, his decision made. Ayana shook her head slowly, her lips curling into a small smile. It's not that simple, she said. You can't just help. You have to understand. Jake's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle in front of him. He had been part of this world for so long, but Ayana's words made him realize how little he truly knew about the forces at play here. So what now? He asked, his voice filled with both resolve and uncertainty. Ayana's eyes softened just for a moment, and she sighed. No, she said. We wait. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jake standing there, feeling more alone than ever, as the river continued to flow relentlessly, carrying with it secrets he was only beginning to understand. I thought about Ayana's words long after she had walked away, her figure disappearing into the fading light. The air felt heavier now, charged with something that I couldn't quite explain. I stood there at the river's edge, the sound of the rushing water mixing with the strange pull in my chest, like the land itself was calling to me. The question that had been lingering in my mind since I met her was still unanswered. What was she protecting? What did she mean by balance? I had spent so many years in this town, in this land, but Ayana made me realize how little I truly knew. The cowboy in me had always prided myself on understanding the land, the people, the way of life. But now, standing here in the dimming light, I felt as though I was standing on the edge of something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. The land was more than just a place to work, to survive. It was alive, it had memories, it had a heartbeat. And Ayana, she was part of that. The sky above me was darkening, and a sense of urgency began to grow inside me. I couldn't let this go. I needed answers. The following morning, I found myself back at the Riverbend, my horse steady beneath me. The cool morning air filled my lungs as I rode toward the spot where Ayana had stood the day before. The place felt different today, more alive. More charged. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe just another chance to speak with her. Maybe an answer to the questions that had been keeping me up at night. As I approached, I saw her again, standing by the water's edge, her back to me. She hadn't heard me coming, and for a moment I just watched her. The way she stood there, so still, so at peace with the world, made me wonder how she could hold so much power and such quiet silence. Slowly, I dismounted and approached her. "Ayana," I called gently, not wanting to startle her. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. There was no hostility in her gaze, but there was something else, something deeper. "You came back," she said simply, her voice calm. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I need to understand, Ayana. You talked about the land, about protecting something. What is it? What's really going on?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer to the water, her eyes scanning the horizon. "The balance, Cowboy," she said finally. "The balance is fragile. It's been that way for centuries, longer than any of us can remember. And it's been protected, not by force, but by understanding. The land knows what it needs, and so do we." Her words were cryptic, but there was a truth to them that I couldn't ignore. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "What happens if the balance is disturbed?" She looked at me then, her eyes meeting mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like fear in her gaze. "That is what you must never find out," she said softly. The weight of her words hit me like a thunderclap. I didn't know what she meant, but I knew that whatever it was big. The land, the people, the choices I would make, it was all connected. And I had to be careful. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ayana took a step closer, her eyes never leaving mine. "Listen to the land," she said. "It will speak to you. But you must listen carefully. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do." With that, she turned away, walking back toward the trees. I stood there, alone again, the weight of her words settling deep inside me. The river flowed, the land breathed, and somewhere in the distance, I knew something was coming. Something that would change everything. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to make sense of Ayana's words. The idea of the land having a balance, a delicate harmony that could be disrupted, weighed heavily on my mind. It wasn't like anything I had ever heard before, but something in me couldn't shake the feeling that it was true. I couldn't get the image of Ayana standing by the river, her eyes so sure of the danger that could come if the balance was broken, out of my head. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the answers might lie in the land itself, in the place that had been my home for as long as I could remember. Riverbend was a small town, quiet for the most part. But lately, things had been off. There were whispers in town about strange happenings in the surrounding wilderness, missing cattle, mysterious figures seen in the distance. People were on edge. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to go back to the river, back to where Ayana had spoken to me, and find out what it was she was warning me about. The land was calling me, I could feel it now. So, on the 5th day after my encounter with Ayana, I found myself on horseback again, heading back to the river. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting a warm golden light across the valley. The air was cool, and the scent of pine and earth filled my lungs as I rode. I could hear the rush of the river before I even reached the bend. I dismounted and led my horse to the same spot where Ayana had stood. The water flowed, steady and powerful, as it had always done. I stood there for a moment, letting the sound of the river calm my thoughts. But then I saw her. Ayana was there again, standing by the water. This time, she wasn't facing away from me. She was looking directly at me, as if she had been waiting for me to come. I didn't need to say anything. She simply nodded and stepped forward, motioning for me to follow. I did, my heart pounding in my chest. We walked side by side, not speaking, but the silence between us felt different this time, charged, like something important was about to happen. Finally, she stopped and turned to face me. "You've come," she said quietly, her voice calm but strong. "Now you must listen." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. She gazed out at the river for a moment before speaking again. "The balance is fragile, Cowboy. You've seen the signs, haven't you? The land is restless." I thought about the strange events in town, the unease that had settled over Riverbend, and nodded again. I've seen it, I said. I don't know what to do about it, though. Ayana smiled, a small, knowing smile. That's why you're here, she said. You're not meant to fix it, Cowboy. You're meant to understand it. Her words hit me like a weight, like the truth I had been searching for but didn't know how to find. Understand it? I repeated, unsure of what she meant. The land doesn't need to be fixed, she said. It only needs to be understood. The balance is held in the way we live with it, the way we respect it. She paused, as if letting the words sink in. But the world around us doesn't always respect that balance. And when it's threatened, the consequences are more than anyone can imagine. I swallowed, trying to process what she was saying. What can I do? I asked, feeling both lost and determined. Ayana turned to face me fully, her eyes sharp and intense. You already are, she said. By being here, by listening, you've taken the first step. Now you must watch. The signs are all around you. The land will speak, but only to those who are willing to listen. The weight of her words hung in the air between us. The sky above was darkening, and the river continued to flow, unchanging, relentless. And for the first time, I understood. This was bigger than me, bigger than Riverbend. It was about something that had been here long before any of us, and it would continue long after we were gone. And if I was to be a part of it, I had to listen, truly listen, to what the land was trying to tell me. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of urgency in my chest. The night had passed quietly, but the silence felt different now. The weight of Ayana's words had settled deep within me, and it was as if the world around me had shifted. The land was speaking, and I needed to listen. I grabbed my coat and headed out the door, the cool morning air hitting my face as I stepped into the open. The town of Riverbend was still asleep, the only sounds coming from the distant clink of hooves and the rustling of leaves in the wind. I made my way toward the river, drawn to the place where everything had started. The ride was peaceful, almost like the calm before a storm. The sky was clear, and the sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows over the land. When I arrived at the river bend, I tied my horse to a nearby post and walked down to the water's edge. The river was still and quiet this morning, the usual rush of the current now barely a whisper. It was as if everything was waiting, holding its breath. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. The land had always been a part of me, but now, it felt like it was more alive, more connected to everything. Ayana's warning about the balance echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. It was only a matter of time. I was just starting to think about heading back when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned quickly, expecting to see a deer or some other animal, but instead, it was Ayana, emerging from the trees. She walked toward me with purpose, her movements fluid, almost as if she were part of the land itself. You're here, she said softly, her eyes scanning the area. I nodded, not knowing exactly what to say. I'm listening, I replied, my voice steady. Ayana gave a small nod and looked out at the river. Good, she said, her voice low. The land has spoken. And now, we must act. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I knew she wasn't speaking lightly. What do we do? I asked, stepping closer to her. We wait, she said simply, her gaze fixed on the water. The signs are clear, but the time is not yet right. I frowned, confused. What signs? What exactly am I waiting for? She turned to face me, her eyes piercing, as if she were seeing straight through me. The balance is delicate, she explained. It is being threatened, not by the land itself, but by those who do not understand it. The signs are subtle, but they are there, if you know where to look. I listened intently, feeling a sense of urgency rise in me. I didn't fully understand what she was saying, but I knew she was right. Something was off, and I had to be a part of whatever was coming. What do I need to do? I asked again, my voice firm. Ayana remained silent for a moment, her gaze never leaving the river. The land will guide you, she said finally. But you must trust it. Trust yourself. I nodded, feeling a sense of clarity wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose. I'm ready, I said, more to myself than to her. Ayana gave a faint smile, and for a moment, I saw something softer in her eyes. Then let's begin. And with that, she turned and began walking toward the trees. I followed her without a word, knowing that whatever was coming, it was something bigger than either of us, and the land was the only thing that could guide us through it. I followed Ayana deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller and denser as we moved further from the Riverbend. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the quiet was almost unsettling. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Ayana moved ahead with a calm certainty, her every step purposeful, as if she knew exactly where she was going. I tried to keep up, but I felt the weight of my thoughts pressing in on me. I had spent so many years in this land, yet now, with Ayana at my side, it felt as though I was seeing it for the first time. I had always thought of the land as something to work, something to tame, but now I understood that it was more than that. It was alive. It had a rhythm, a pulse. And Ayana, somehow, seemed to be connected to it in a way I couldn't explain. After what felt like hours of walking, Ayana finally stopped in a small clearing. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long, dappled shadows on the ground. In the center of the clearing was a large rock, smooth and flat, with ancient markings carved into its surface. I recognized some of the symbols I had seen before in old stories, but I had never understood their meaning. Ayana stood in front of the rock, her hand resting on its surface as she closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the stillness of the place. "This is where it begins," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ayana opened her eyes and turned to face me. "The balance has already been disturbed," she said, her gaze intense. "But it is not too late to restore it." I felt a chill run through me. "How?" I asked, unsure of what she was asking me to do. Ayana looked at the markings on the rock, her fingers tracing the edges of the symbols. "The land speaks," she said softly. "But only those who are willing to listen can understand." I watched her for a moment, trying to grasp what she meant. I had always thought of the land as something static, something that didn't change. But now, I was beginning to understand that it was more dynamic than I could have imagined. "What do I need to do?" I asked, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on my shoulders. Ayana's eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in her gaze, something that made me realize how much was at stake. "You must listen," she said simply. "The land will guide you, but you must be patient. The signs will come when you are ready." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what she meant. I had so many questions, but I knew that now was not the time to ask them. Ayana turned back to the rock, her hand still resting on its surface. "The balance is fragile," she said, her voice low. "But it is not beyond saving. You will see the signs, Cowboy. They are all around you." I stood there for a long moment, watching Ayana as she stood in front of the rock. The air was still, and the silence between us was heavy. I knew that I had come to a turning point, that everything was about to change. And yet, I still didn't fully understand what was happening. But Ayana had said something important, that the land would guide me. It was a thought that stayed with me as I turned and made my way back through the forest. The quiet seemed to stretch on forever, but for the first time, I felt like I was truly listening. The land was speaking, and it was up to me to understand what it was saying. I had spent the past few days thinking about everything Ayana had said, and though I wasn't sure what exactly was coming, I knew something was changing in Riverbend. The town felt different, heavier somehow, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As I sat on the porch of my cabin that evening, watching the last light of the sun dip behind the mountains, I couldn't shake the feeling that the signs Ayana had spoken of were all around me, but I just didn't know how to read them yet. The land, the river, the wind, they were all speaking, but in ways I couldn't fully understand. I couldn't help but wonder what had been lost. What had been disturbed? I had been raised to believe that everything in this land had its place, its rhythm. But now, I wasn't so sure. I had never believed in much more than what I could see and touch: cattle, crops, the land beneath my boots. But Ayana had opened my eyes to something deeper. Something ancient. Something that tied the very fabric of this land together. As the night grew darker, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees. It was colder than it had been in days, and a storm was coming. I could feel it in the air. I rose from the porch and walked down to the barn, checking on my horse and making sure everything was in order for the night. But as I turned to head back to the cabin, I heard a sound, a faint, low rumble that seemed to come from the direction of the river. I froze for a moment, my heart racing. I knew that sound. It was the sound of thunder, distant but powerful. And it wasn't just the storm I could hear. There was something else, a hum in the air, a vibration that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. It was as if the land was shaking, waking up. I hurried back to the cabin, my mind racing. Ayana's words echoed in my head: the balance has already been disturbed. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew one thing: whatever was coming, it was closer now. The storm wasn't just a storm. It was part of something bigger. I could feel it. The wind howled outside as the rain began to fall, drumming against the roof of the cabin. The trees swayed in the gusts, and the river seemed to roar louder than it had before, as if it were alive, angry. I paced back and forth, unsure of what to do. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but something told me I needed to be ready. The land was speaking, and I had to listen. Just then, a knock on the door startled me. My heart jumped, and I hesitated before walking over to answer it. I opened the door cautiously, and there she was, Ayana, standing in the doorway, her face serious, her eyes wide with urgency. "It's time," she said, her voice low but steady. "We need to go now." My mind was racing, but I knew there was no time to waste. I grabbed my coat and followed her out into the night, the storm swirling around us. As we made our way through the trees, the sounds of the forest felt different, more intense, as if everything was alive with anticipation. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, the only sounds the storm and the crunch of leaves beneath our boots. Finally, we reached the clearing, the same one where Ayana had shown me the markings on the rock. But now, the air felt different. It was charged, electric, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Ayana stopped in the center of the clearing and turned to face me. "This is where it will end," she said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the wind. "But it's not the end you're expecting." I stood there, unsure of what to say. The storm was growing fiercer, the rain coming down in sheets, but something in Ayana's eyes told me this was where the balance would either be restored or destroyed. The land was about to speak, and I had no choice but to listen. I stood in the center of the clearing, the storm raging around me, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees around us creaked and groaned, their branches whipping in the wind, but Ayana stood still, like the force of nature itself could not touch her. I tried to steady my breathing, but something deep inside me was telling me that this moment, whatever it was not just a storm, it was the turning point. Ayana's words echoed in my mind, "This is where it will end. But it's not the end you're expecting." The rain was coming down in sheets, but I couldn't bring myself to look away from her. She seemed to be waiting for something, her eyes scanning the darkness, her posture unwavering. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast, something unknown, and every instinct in me screamed that I needed to trust her. "What is it?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse from the tension that had built up between us. Ayana didn't immediately answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her feet silent on the wet earth as if the storm had no effect on her. She raised her arms, palms open to the sky, and for a moment, I thought she was simply embracing the fury of the storm. But then she spoke, her voice rising above the wind. "The balance is fragile," she said, her tone firm yet soft. "And there are forces at work that would see it destroyed." I stood still, trying to process her words, but I couldn't quite understand. What forces? I asked. Ayana didn't look at me as she spoke again, her voice steady and calm despite the storm raging around us. Not all storms are natural, Cowboy, she said, her gaze still fixed on the sky. Some are made by those who do not understand the land. They do not understand the power they are tampering with. They think they can take, but they do not know how to give. She paused for a moment, her eyes narrowing, and I saw the fire in them that I had first noticed when we met. You've seen the signs, she continued. You know that something is coming. Something that could change everything. I swallowed, my throat dry. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation. I could feel the land beneath my feet, the pulse of the earth itself, almost as if it were alive, as if it were responding to Ayana's words. What do I do? I asked again, my voice urgent, desperate for some kind of direction. Ayana turned to face me then, her expression unreadable. She took a step closer, her presence overwhelming, yet somehow grounding. You listen, she said softly. The land will tell you what you need to know. But you must be ready to hear it, to understand it, when it speaks. Her words hit me like a revelation. It wasn't just about reacting. It was about understanding, about listening to the very heart of the earth. The land had been speaking all along, and I had been too blind to hear it. I glanced around at the forest, the storm, the river in the distance. It was all part of something larger, something I was only beginning to understand. Ayana seemed to sense my confusion, and she offered me a small smile, one that held no amusement, only a quiet certainty. You are a part of this land, she said. Your path was always meant to intersect with it. But you must choose whether you will fight it or work with it. The words felt like a challenge, like a test. And for the first time, I understood that this wasn't just about me. This was about something much bigger. Ayana turned her gaze back to the storm, the intensity in her eyes unwavering. The time is coming, Cowboy. The storm is only the beginning. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I knew that whatever it was something I had to face, something I had to understand. As the storm raged on around us, I knew that my journey was far from over. The land had spoken, and now, it was time for me to listen. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, the storm still howling around us, the trees bending under its force. Ayana's words had settled deeply within me, and now, I felt the weight of the land pressing down on my chest, urging me to act, to understand, to listen. The air crackled with the tension of the moment, as if the earth itself was waiting for something to break, to shift. Ayana remained calm, her eyes focused on the horizon, as if she could already see what was coming. I turned my gaze back to the river, the water moving violently, as if echoing the chaos in the sky above. The storm wasn't just a storm, it was a warning. I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to do, but I knew I couldn't stand here any longer. What do we do now? I asked, my voice barely audible over the wind. Ayana's response came without hesitation. Now we wait, she said, her voice steady. The signs are here. They have been here all along. I felt a pang of frustration. Wait. It didn't feel like the time to wait. The world felt as though it were on the edge of something that would change everything. Wait for what? I asked, my voice rising slightly, desperation creeping in. Ayana turned to face me then, her expression calm, but her eyes filled with something deeper. Wait for the right moment, she said softly. The land will reveal what you need to know, but only when you are ready. Her words echoed in my mind. Ready? What did that mean? Was I supposed to be ready for something specific? Was there a sign I had missed? My mind raced with questions, but Ayana simply stood there, her posture relaxed, as though she had already seen the answer. The storm raged around us, the wind whipping through the trees, but Ayana remained unmoved. It was as if she was in perfect harmony with the chaos surrounding us. I felt a sudden wave of calm wash over me. The land, the storm, it was all part of something bigger. Ayana had told me to listen, and now, for the first time, I truly understood. I wasn't supposed to fight the storm. I wasn't supposed to resist the land. I was supposed to listen, to feel its rhythm, to understand its pulse. The rain fell harder, but I no longer felt cold. I felt connected, in tune with the earth beneath me. And in that moment, I knew Ayana was right. I wasn't here to control what was coming. I was here to witness it. To learn from it, to be a part of it. The river continued to flow, wild and untamed, and I knew it was telling its own story. The storm would pass, but the land would remain. And if I was to truly understand it, I had to accept that I wasn't in control. The world would reveal itself when it was ready, not when I wanted it to. "It's time," Ayana said suddenly, her voice breaking through my thoughts. I turned to look at her, unsure of what she meant. She nodded toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking through the storm clouds. "The balance is shifting," she said, "and we must be ready." The storm, though still fierce, was beginning to subside. The sky was clearing, and the land seemed to breathe a little easier. Ayana was right. The signs were here, and they were clear. The storm had passed, and now, it was time for me to listen to what came next.